All right, recording in progress. Beautiful. All right. So here we are, another BYOG, Be Your Own Guarantee journey and expert session. I am so excited to have Kevin Ellis here. Holy cow. Hey, Kevin, how's it going?
Dr. Ryan, how you doing?
Just wanted to say hi before I said a little bit about you to the BYOGers, but I think you are all going to love this because Kevin, he's a certified integrative nutrition health coach, he's a podcaster, YouTuber, bone health advocate. You can see right there, he's the bone coach, bonecoach.com. And I'm excited to have him here because osteoporosis, bone health, prevention, it is so misunderstood. It is so, in just the mainstream and what you're told to do. Oh, just have calcium. And, it's not just that, not that. My mom is one, especially that, she says, well, what should I take? She's going to be 70 this year, I think. Yeah. In 2022. And, she has, I guess been diagnosed with osteopenia. She doesn't take any medications for it. So I know just personally how that can affect life, with my family. But I know, again, your journey, that's why I love people who, the guests I have on here to start with is their origin story. Where did you come from? Why were you drawn to helping people with osteopenia, osteoporosis? So I'd love you to share that, Kevin.
Yeah, no, I'd be happy, Aaron. It's a pleasure to be here. And like you had mentioned, I'm a health coach now at this point. We've got a highly credentialed team of people. It's really not just me that works with the people we work with now. We work primarily with women in their 50s to 70s that have osteopenia and osteoporosis. And then we have coaching programs where we walk people through step by step, how to address bone loss, build bone strength, prevent fracture and injury, and just kind of take back your future so you can have an active life. That's really the focus of what we do now, but obviously it didn't start there. My entire health journey really started when I was a lot younger. Actually, I'll even go way back. When my mother was 5 months pregnant with me, my father was told he had cancer. And 2 months after I was born, he passed away. He was 35 years old. And my entire life, I had this fear that I was going to follow in his footsteps to an early grave and not have the opportunity to watch my kids grow up and experience the joys of being a father. And when I was diagnosed with osteoporosis at 31, and I had all these other health issues, that were taking place, gut health issues, low energy, not sleeping, just so many other things taking place, autoimmune condition. I thought my fate was destined to be the same as my father. And at the time, I had a young daughter, had a son on the way. I was devastated. And I remember the day the doctor sat down with me and confirmed I had osteoporosis. And it wasn't just like a letter in the mail, like actually sat down with me. And her exact words were, "This is going to be an issue for you. Bone drugs and fracture were my future." And I walked out of that office afraid. And, for the people who know me well, I'm like my background, Marine Corps infantry, multiple combat deployments, things like that. And there are not a lot of things that are going to really strike fear into my heart, but that did. And that was one of those things that, when I got home that night, I was laying on the couch across from my wife. My daughter was upstairs sleeping, and I looked up and I saw my favorite picture of her on the wall. And she was a little over 1 year old, wearing this cute polka dot dress, standing in front of a white picket fence, blonde hair, blue eyes, innocent, sweet as could be. And I just broke down crying. And I cried hard, right? It was the kind of cry that empties the sum of life's burdens. And when I was done, I looked over at her and I just said, "I just want to dance with my daughter on her wedding day." And she needed her daddy. And I questioned whether I would even be alive to be there for her. And I didn't even know how to make sense of it all. I thought I was the only person my age going through it, had no idea what life was going to be like moving forward. I was angry, upset, overwhelmed, and I was scared. I didn't know where to start. And I had to spend a great deal of time doing reading and research and working with doctors and consulting with different people and spending a lot of money trying to figure all this out. And eventually my mindset started to shift from being afraid and overwhelmed and stressed to feeling confident and educated and empowered. And I wanted to be there for my family, and not just be there for my family, but take the information I was learning and help myself and then help other people. And once I got to the point where I kind of figured things out, got the right plan in place for me, and actually started making progress in my own health and my own bones, that's when I realized how challenging it is for the average person. It's mostly not the average, man in their early 30s. That's usually not the case. Usually it's the average woman in their 50s, 60s, 70s that has osteopenia and osteoporosis to figure out what they need to do to improve, to address bone loss, build bone strength, prevent fracture and injury. Because the recommendation by most physicians at that point is calcium, vitamin D, walking, and a bone medication. And that is woefully inadequate. And so really for that reason that I started bonecoach.com and, went down this path of wanting to serve and help other people and on this journey.
Wow. That was powerful. I got the chills multiple times as you were just sharing that. So I appreciate you sharing that, because I know it can be tough. We're similar. Like my first dad, he died when I was 2 months old as well, not of any disease, but he was in a car accident. So I have an older brother. And so my mom was left as a single mom, and thankfully, she remarried, and my dad, who actually just passed away a few months ago, my second dad, which
sorry to hear that.
So again, I resonate so much with that, because even what you said, you want to be around for your kids. You want to not just be around, you want to walk them down the aisle, you want to dance with them. And that's, way back when I started this, still my email address at this point is called upgradedparents.com, where I wanted to help parents take care of themselves so they can be there to take care of their kids. And I still hold that inside of me, where I want to be the provider and protector and take care of them. And to do that, we have to take care of ourselves, which a lot of parents, and especially dads and moms too, I don't even want to limit it there, we can feel selfish by doing that. But I mean, who do you have to take care of first if the plane's going down, or who do you put the mask on first? You do, so you can help others. So, I mean, I commend you for doing that and for sharing that. And like you said, can be confusing for the average person. The osteopenia, osteoporosis. You were in your 30s and diagnosed. And I can guarantee there's so many people listening to this that are scared themselves and don't know what to do. But first we have to understand, what the heck is it? What are we dealing with? So I'd love for you to explain, what's the difference basically between osteopenia and osteoporosis, and what does that mean?
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so osteoporosis literally means porous bone. Okay, it's a disease characterized by either not enough bone formation, excessive bone loss, or it's a combination of the two. And in osteoporosis, it's where you have both bone quality and bone density that are reduced, and that's going to increase our risk of fracture. And the way you find out if you have osteoporosis, and osteopenia is like a precursor to osteoporosis, basically. But the way you find out you have osteoporosis is through a DEXA scan. That is dual energy X-ray absorptiometry. It's a painless test, kind of like an X-ray, but very low levels of radiation. And you lay down on the machine does a scan, tells you your bone mineral density, and that's the actual bone mineral content, like the mineral content in your bone. And then it's going to generate a score. And that score is called a T-score. And a T-score is going to compare your bone mineral density to that of a healthy young adult. Okay, so a score of 0, let's say, means your BMD, your bone mineral density, is equal to the norm of a healthy young adult. Okay, 0 to -1. And then a score of +1 or -1, that's considered normal or healthy. And then a T-score of -1 to -2.5, that indicates that you have low bone mass, sometimes called osteopenia. Okay, and then a T-score of -2.5 or lower, so -2.6, -2.7, so on and so forth, that indicates you have osteoporosis. And the greater that negative number becomes, the more severe the osteoporosis is, and the greater the potential for fracture. Okay, so that's based on the World Health Organization's criteria. Most women, most men and women, men are probably going to get them a little bit later in life, but most women are going to get these scans by the time they're in their 50s and 60s as a check in the box. Sometimes, their doctors are going to order them. If you haven't done one yet, and you're listening to this or watching this now, it's a good idea to get a baseline, right? We don't want to avoid doing something just because the answer may not be something we don't want to hear. right? You can't address something until you're aware of it. So that's probably the first thing I would want to say. Now, there are some other technologies to really understand your bone density and your bone quality. There's some ultrasound technologies and some other things, but that's probably going to be the primary way that you're looking at to understand your bone density.
I love the point of don't not do something because you're afraid of what you're going to find out. Hey, I've fallen into that trap.
I think we all have.
But yes, I totally on board with that. So for example, you would recommend even myself getting a DEXA scan so then I have a baseline.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea. And honestly, if a lot of the women that I'm speaking to or people that I'm speaking to, and we do work with men too, there's just a smaller percentage of men. So I'm referencing more women, but usually the people I'm working with, they're in their 50s and 60s, and they're not just worried about themselves. They're talking about their daughter, who's 30 or 40. They want to not just learn the information for them to improve their own bones, but also to help their daughters be on the side of prevention too, which I love that. That's really where my passion lies too, is in the side of prevention and not reaction. So I would encourage, if your 30-year-old daughter, or if you're a 30-year-old woman listening to this right now, get a bone density scan, get a baseline early on. So that way, when you hit menopause and, there's the potential for bone loss because of the decrease in estrogen, you've already got an understanding of kind of where your bones were at in the first place. And there are some other things around that I can definitely talk about and go into if you want me to.
Yeah, well, I mean, I know we're gonna get into it for sure, and I just want to mention this because I just did a video inside the group yesterday about like the spine. I'm a spine doctor. I've trained as a chiropractor, and what happens is when there's that bone loss, it makes it easier, and the bones get weaker. And now gravity is that much easier it's that much easier for gravity to make you basically slump over and then cause these little micro fractures, even in the bone, cause a hyperkyphosis. And that is directly related and correlated with decrease of a lifespan. So again, these types of things all go together. Now, you alluded to it a little bit, like you said, the four things, like the four traditional things that are taught as measures. So why is that not enough? Why, is that just the standard? Is there something else that standard traditional medical protocol, and why is it not enough?
Yeah, absolutely. So when we're talking about osteoporosis, I always say chronic conditions need more than acute solutions. So I always ask people, like, when it comes to your bone health, I tell people to imagine you have a bucket of water. Okay. And the bucket represents your body, and the water within the bucket represents your bone mineral density, the measure of how much bone you have. And then I tell people to visualize that this bucket has a small hole in it with a very tiny leak. And over time, over years and years, that water level gets lower and lower and lower until one day you realize your water is low. Right? You get a bone density scan, you realize you have low bone density, you have osteopenia or osteoporosis, and you're shocked. I thought my bucket was full of water, or maybe you just didn't know. And usually it's either one of two scenarios. So either you have a bunch of other health issues, and that's what led you to get a DEXA scan as a check in the box, or you're on the opposite end of the spectrum. You work out, you're eating healthy, you're doing everything right, and you get a DEXA scan as a check in the box, and you find out you have osteopenia and osteoporosis. In either of those two scenarios, what I've come to find is that the immediate visceral reaction, like mine was, is how do I fix this right now? Right? You have this visceral reaction. We have this impending sense of doom, this desperate scramble to secure our future, and this desire to reach some sort of resolution. And sometimes we're going to make quick, drastic decisions, potentially taking a medication or a bone drug, and that might be influenced by your physician too, before we fully understand the picture. So you might try to immediately plug the hole and fill our buckets back up with water, and we might do it before identifying where the hole is, what caused it, or if there was even a hole in the first place, because their bucket may not have even been full of water to begin with. So what we need to ask is, would you try to fill your bucket up with water if you knew there was still a hole in it? In other words, would you try to immediately improve your bone density something that likely took years and years to develop without first understanding what's causing it, if you're still actively losing bone right now, or, and this is the kicker, if you never just built up enough bone in your younger years. Okay. And unfortunately, I see it all the time. Most people do not know the answers to your those questions. So let's talk about the first one. Is there a hole in your bucket? Okay. Another way of asking this question, are you still actively losing bone? So a single bone density scan will not tell you that. Okay. You need to know the answer to this question before you make any decisions. It's because something is causing that bone loss. Could be multiple things, and those causes need to be addressed. Because if you don't address them, you're going to continue to lose bone. Okay. And if we're losing bone, it's going to decrease our bone strength and increase our fracture risk. So one of the things that we can do to understand if we're actively losing bone is there's a blood test called the serum CTX test, CT low peptide test. And what this test looks at is it looks at basically bone collagen fragments. And that is going to tell you the activity level of cells that are breaking down bone. And if that activity level is really high, if you have, these collagen bone protein fragments, a lot of them, that's going to be an indicator that there's high levels of bone loss taking place, right? So that's one way to know if you're actively losing bone. So the next thing we need to look at is what caused the hole, right? So we need to figure out what's causing the bone loss. If that activity level of cells is really high and you're breaking down a lot of that collagen bone protein, a lot of people don't know this, but there are multiple types of osteoporosis, right? There's primary osteoporosis, which that's related to a decrease in estrogen in postmenopausal women. Estrogen has a protective effect on bone. When estrogen levels decrease, as they do during menopause, it's going to cause an increase in the activity level of cells that break down bone. But then there's a whole nother cause of osteoporosis, and that's secondary osteoporosis. And this is the category I fell into. And this is where osteoporosis occurs as a result of behaviors, conditions, diseases, disorders, and even medications. Okay. And most people who are unexpectedly diagnosed, 30, 40, 50, 60s, they have or had a secondary cause. And if that's contributing to bone loss, you need to figure it out. Right. So just because you're a postmenopausal woman, and this is one of the reasons why I said the standard recommendation is not adequate, is a lot of times it's just an assumption that's made that it's just hormones. We chalk it up to just hormones. Just because you're a postmenopausal woman does not mean that it's the sole cause of your bone loss. Okay. Could be more than just hormones. There could be another cause. So the last part of that, because I'm going to close the loop on this whole bucket thing that I'm going for here. So the last part I want you to keep in mind is that if you are diagnosed with osteoporosis, it does not mean that you are still actively losing bone right now. You may just not have built up enough bone in your younger years. Okay, up to 90% of your bone mass is acquired by age 18, and it's going to peak by the time you turn 30. So by the time you turn 30, your bucket is about as full as it's going to be for the most part. Okay, if when you were younger, you had an eating disorder, poor nutrition, low calcium and vitamin D intake, you smoked or drank excessively, you led a sedentary lifestyle, or if you took certain medications, those all could have prevented you from achieving peak bone mass and starting with a full bucket. Okay, and that's why I said you should get a bone density scan early on so you get a baseline. What was your peak bone mass at? So you can monitor changes objectively over time.
That was amazing. Normally I'm like scribbling notes, but I got to definitely go back through and take notes because everything you're saying is going to be so applicable and just so good. And, I love the bucket analogy. I use a bucket analogy myself, like with how the brain works and neurology.
Yeah, it's a good one. That's a good one.
And and you can use it in so many different ways, but how to explain it, but that was beautiful. Absolutely beautiful. So now let's get into actual solutions. And I love the line that you said, it's like chronic conditions need more than acute solutions. And that could be on our flag. That's Absolutely. Exactly right. So many times we want to just throw acute solutions. Well, we call them solutions, but acute things at a chronic problem, expect it to get better. And it's still happening with osteoporosis, with bone health. And I love your principle of prevention. Yes, absolutely. I love prevention. let's do that. So BYOGers, if you have daughters or whoever, definitely have them get these tests in check to make sure that, that they have that peak bone health, that it's already there, that they're not losing bone.
Yep.
So this is great. So let's get into some solutions, especially as it relates to, healthy lifestyle, because I know, nutrition is important, exercise, mindset, all these things are helpful. I was actually on Bone Coach, the Bone Coach Facebook page today, and I saw all the cool recipes that you had on there.
Yeah.
The videos, I'm going to have to get with you and see how you did those, because I love those types of things.
Absolutely.
But yes, let's get into some nutrition part. Like, is there a perfect nutrition plan or diet to help one? I mean, I don't know if it's the same thing or not, to one, restore and help bone mass, and two, is it the same as, preventing bone loss?
Yeah. So this is great. So a lot of times people always ask me about, what's the perfect diet? I actually tell people we need to back up first. And I want to use another, we'll forget about the bucket for a minute. Let's use a different analogy or metaphor here for a minute. So think of your bodies and our bones like plants, right? In order to grow, you need the right nutrients and the right conditions, right? Most people focus so much on the nutrients, the salads, the smoothies, the supplements, that they fail to consider the soil. Our gut is like the soil, okay? We absorb almost everything here. So when we take in food or supplements, we start to break it down, into smaller pieces in our mouth. That food then makes its way into our stomach, where it's churned in this acidic mix, where we break it down even further. And then it makes its way to the small intestine, our soil. And this is where nutrients are broken down to their smallest form to be absorbed by us, the plants. Okay. But in order to absorb anything, we need roots in our soil. And our roots are called villi. That's these tiny little hair-like projections cover our small intestine, and they're responsible for absorbing nutrients. They absorb nutrients from the food you eat and then shuttle those nutrients into your bloodstream so they can travel where they're needed in the body. And whether that's healing a cut on your hand, growing your hair or fingernails, or rebuilding stronger bones, right? The job of our roots, our villi, is so important that the total surface area they use to absorb nutrients, get this, it's the size of a football field. How amazing is that, right? But when we have poor digestion and our gut health isn't optimal, we can't properly break down our food. And when we can't properly break down our food, nutrients aren't going to be available. And if nutrients aren't available, the villi aren't going to be able to absorb them. And then the body's not going to have the raw materials and resources needed to build stronger, healthier bones. So where do we actually have to start? We have to start with our nutrients making it to your soil. If you have bloating and belching, burping, excessive gas, diarrhea after meals, you feel like food just sits in your stomach and stagnates for a long time, there's a good chance you have low stomach acid. Okay. Age, stress, nutrient deficiencies, gut infections, those are all contributors. Surprisingly, do you know what one of the best indicators of low stomach acid is? Reflux. Shocking, right? And when most people have reflux, what do they do for it? They take the same thing I took for a number of years, Tums and proton pump inhibitors like Prilosec, Prevacid, Nexium, Omeprazole. And like most people who take PPIs, I mistakenly thought I had too much stomach acid. And I ended up suppressing what little stomach acid I did have. And the reason that's a problem is because we need stomach acid to properly break down and extract nutrients from our food, like amino acids, the building blocks of protein. Our bones are 50% protein by volume. They need amino acids. Calcium, the primary mineral constituent of our bones, low stomach acid reduces its absorption. Magnesium, iron, B12. If you have low stomach acid, your soil will be starved of these nutrients and others. Okay. And then the next part of this is, does your soil have the right balance of bugs? Okay. Other problems can arise if your soil has the wrong balance of bugs, dysbiosis, the presence of bad bugs, gut infections, or even good bugs in the wrong place, small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, or SIBO. Okay. These bugs make up our microbiome. When our microbiome is out of balance, it negatively affects your body's ability to absorb nutrients and contributes to leaky gut and systemic inflammation, both of which are bad for our body and our bones. So how do you know if your bugs are not balanced? Well, you may be experiencing some of those other things I just talked about, like bloating, belching, excessive gas, heartburn, constipation, diarrhea, even fatigue. Those could all be indicators. And then the last part of this is, are your roots working properly? Okay, there are multiple conditions and diseases that can affect your body's ability to absorb nutrients. Celiac disease is one of them, and it's the primary reason I developed osteoporosis in my early 30s. How does celiac disease contribute to nutrient malabsorption and bone loss? Well, when you ingest gluten, those villi, our roots, become blunted, okay, where they can't do their job. So for me, my roots effectively became damaged, and my body was being starved of key bone healthy nutrients, calcium, phosphorus, vitamin D. Those are usually absorbed up a little higher in the small intestine, which is where most of that damage is likely to occur. And then that went on for years. So I had no idea calcium was being raked from my bones to serve other purposes in my body, right? Because you need calcium to execute daily functions, and other nutrients too. And the greatest challenge I see here is that a large percentage of people who have celiac disease or even other, gut health issues and conditions and diseases, they don't even know it, because they might not even have the classic GI symptoms. So you might not even be aware your roots are being damaged. Okay, so if at least for celiac disease testing, you can get a test called the TTG IgA. You can get total serum IgA, some IgG IgA, antibodies. Those can help you understand. As long as you've been consuming gluten within the past 30 days, you will have some antibodies present, most likely, that test is going to be somewhat accurate. And then the last part of this is, are you getting the right nutrients in the right amounts to your soil, right? Simply put, if you're not putting the right foods into your body, or you're eating the wrong foods, or you're not getting enough nutrients, or you're not getting the right nutrients in the right amounts, you're going to have a really challenging time slowing, stopping, preventing more bone loss, and you're not going to build bone, right? So we can't possibly expect to rebuild something if it's not there, right? So what we need to do is, every opportunity that you're consuming, your meals and things like that, and we'll talk about specific foods here in just a minute, but it's going to look different for every single person. There is no perfect diet for every single person. We're all biochemically and genetically unique individuals. We're going to respond to different foods and dietary approaches differently. So it's not a rigid framework with zero flexibility. And it's also why when you go into, a Facebook group and you see someone saying, everyone should eat this specific superfood because it's guaranteed to be good for your body and your bones, make note of it, but realize that it might not actually work for you. Because no matter how much of a superfood someone, claims something is, or how great they say it is for your body, your bones, if it creates inflammation in your body, it is not a health food for you. Okay, so that's also going to, based on your own health journey, your own health conditions. If you've got digestive issues, bacterial overgrowth, candida, autoimmune disease, you're trying to put that into remission, your dietary approach is going to differ significantly from somebody who's not. So I would say those are, when it comes to like crafting a diet and gut health and nutrients and absorption and all that stuff, those are the big things people have to consider first.
Yeah. So many people, again, I was just talking to a patient 2 days ago, and she was saying that she's been on antacids or like Prilosec, she's off of it now, but she started getting symptoms and it wasn't helping. And the doctor actually said, well, yeah, it has, because she was worried about it leading to osteoporosis. The patient was, and the doctor said, that's a myth. It doesn't, I'm like, okay, correct. Yeah. I'm like, well, maybe directly, but no, it's leaching the bone because it's trying to, what is it? What's the steal from Peter to pay Paul? We need that calcium for other places. So it's taking it from the bones because you're not getting the nutrients from your diet because of, again, it's that whole like, all right, if it's not one step before, well, then that's not the cause. No, with health, we have to go like 3 or 4 steps above that. So yes, I love that. There's another question I wanted to ask. Shoot.
I can even just walk through like some kind of universal foods, right? I was just talking about not every food.
Let me share this. Sorry about that.
Yeah, sure.
That reminded me because of what you said about food isn't good or bad. If it creates inflammation in your body, it's not going to be helpful for you. And that reminded me of, I talked to Autumn Smith last week in the group, and, the founder of Paleo Valley.
Yeah.
And that's what jogged my memory. It was like, she said that garlic, which is this universal superfood, which is good for everybody, but it's not good for her. She found she had a reaction or a sensitivity to that. So that was a great example that I wanted to share there. But yeah, now I want you to share some basically universal, again, I don't like using that word because no foods, no exercise, no diets, no, and this isn't a Facebook group, so I should be safe. No jabs that you get, no injections that you get are 100% good for everybody, and everybody needs to have that. Same thing with food. So yes, go over some typically good foods to eat for bone health.
Yeah, and that's the way I would say that too. Is like, again, not everything is going to be perfect for everybody that's in their situation, but these are some that are good for most, right? Yeah. Most people will probably do pretty well with these or okay with these. So the first one is some healthy fish, right? So salmon, mackerel, anchovy, sardines, herring, the ones with the bones. And it's not like you're getting a fresh bone-in, fish fillet from Whole Foods or wherever you're going to get your fish, and then you're slapping that on the grill, and then you're eating those hard bones inside the actual fillet. I'm talking about canned, right? When you get them in the cans, the bones almost disintegrate. Like disintegrate, but they get really soft and they're really easy to. They almost melt in your mouth, right? And you might be thinking like, oh, fish bones melting in my mouth. That's not appetizing. But fish, like there are different ways you can dress those up, make it taste better. But what you're getting there is you're getting protein, right? Again, protein is such an important component that a lot of people fall short in when it comes to your bone health. Omega-3s. Inflammation contributes to bone loss and bone damage. Omega-3s are going to help with that. And then the other part of this is when you're consuming those bones, you're consuming all the things that make up bones, right? So you're actually getting the calcium, but you're also getting some of the other things that come with that too, some of the other important minerals also. So if you like those and you can incorporate those, make sure you get the ones with the bone in. That's a great addition for sure. Coconut oil. Anything you wanted to add on that, on salmon?
Which ones you said, which fish again?
Salmon, mackerel, anchovies, sardines, and herring.
And what I want to point out is that's smash, right?
Smash.
That's how I remember it. Mash.
Yep. Smash.
That's also good for brain health. But you see, a lot of these have crossover. They have crossover appeal. Like for lunch today, I'm going to have a sardine salad.
Yeah.
I love sardines. It took me 6 months. I had a can sitting in my pantry for like 6 months from Vital Choice.
Vital Choice is great.
I know at a seminar. I'm like, oh my God. And then I finally ate it. I'm like, this tastes to me, it kind of tastes like tuna fish, but I like it even better. But I make a nice salad with that. My daughters, my wife are like, what are you doing? But hey, they're not there yet. Salmon, I totally agree. I've gotten mackerel before in the can, same thing from Vital Choice. So yes, I wanted to point that out because I thought that those were the 5 that you said, and just smash. That's how I remember it.
Yeah. And Vital Choice, great brand. You mentioned tuna also. Tuna, you're not going to find that with bones in it, but then also with albacore tuna, usually the bigger predatory fish, they have the potential to have more heavy metals, right? Accumulate those metals and things like that. So it's also better to accumulate or consume fish that are lower on the food chain. They probably have a shorter lifespan too. That might be better. And then another food, coconut oil. Okay, coconut oil, it's considered one of the healthiest foods on the planet. Over 1,500 studies showing its benefits. Good for, like we were just talking about, it's usually not just good for one body part, usually helps a lot of different areas, but energy, weight, brain function, heart health, memory, skin, hair, teeth, gut health, and bones, right? So for bones, there were 2 studies that looked at the use of virgin coconut oil on bone loss, and both showed that virgin coconut oil may be helpful not just in the protection against bone loss, but also in the actual improvement of bone structure. Okay, and that may be due in part because the high levels of compounds in coconut oil called polyphenols, which can help protect the body cells and tissues from damage. Coconut oil also contains a type of fatty acids called medium chain triglycerides. Okay, and we'll call them MCTs. And MCTs are metabolized differently than other fats. They go straight to the liver, where they're converted instantly into energy and ketones. And ketones are an efficient, clean burning energy source for the body. Coconut oil also has antimicrobial and antifungal effects. So close to 50% of the fatty acids in coconut oil are lauric acid. And when the body digests lauric acid, it forms a substance called monolaurin. And both lauric acid and monolaurin can help fight bad bugs, pathogens, and even the same bacteria that causes staph infections, C. diff, and the same candida yeast that causes oral thrush. So when we were talking earlier about, if you've got digestive issues or you've got an imbalance of bugs, bad bugs, there are foods that you can also consume that can help with that. It might not be the full resolution. There might be another intervention that has to happen to fully resolve those. But if we're consuming foods that help, that there's only going to be some benefit there, right? So that's another one. Arugula. Arugula is a leafy green, same cruciferous family of vegetables as broccoli and kale. It's rich in potassium, folate, vitamin C, vitamin K, and calcium. All of those are important for bone health. Just 85 grams, about 3 ounces. That's going to provide up to 200 milligrams of calcium. Arugula also contains high levels of phytonutrients like beta carotene, zeaxanthin, lutein. Those are going to be great for your skin health, your eye health. And unlike spinach, which is a really common leafy green for a lot of people, arugula is low in oxalates. And oxalates are considered an anti-nutrient that can bind up bone healthy minerals like calcium and iron in our intestinal tract and block their absorption. And some people with digestive issues, kidney stones, arthritis, joint pain, those may be some indicators. They may have a hard time breaking down and degrading that oxalate. So it's not to say that you should never consume foods that don't contain oxalate. That would probably be impossible or be really, really challenging. But we can swap the spinach for the arugula, okay, in a lot of cases. And then another one, blueberries. Studies indicate that blueberries can help prevent bone loss, show favorable changes in bone biomarkers, have a protective effect on bone in postmenopausal women. Loaded with bone healthy nutrients like vitamin C, vitamin K, manganese, fiber. They have one of the highest antioxidant levels of all fruits and vegetables. And there's a group of antioxidants called anthocyanins. Okay, and this is what gives blueberries that beautiful color. They're thought to be responsible for a lot of different health benefits, and it's good for heart health, brain function, digestion, and not only that, they taste good. Right, they're available just about everywhere. It's not some rare fruit, and they're rich in vitamin C, so you can easily add them to smoothies, sweet treats for the kids, the grandkids. So that's a great one. And the last one I would say that comes top of mind would be vitamin C rich foods. Okay, so vitamin C, key nutrient for body and bone health, been linked to some pretty impressive health benefits, can help with high blood pressure, heart disease risk, gout, iron deficiency, memory, cognition, inflammation, and the body needs vitamin C to form blood vessels, cartilage, muscle, and even collagen in bones. So remember, bones are made up of this collagen protein matrix upon which minerals are laid. And it's going to stimulate procollagen, enhance collagen synthesis, and stimulate something called alkaline phosphatase activity. And that's a marker for osteoblast bone building cell formation. Okay, and some of the other best fruits that have would be berries, citrus fruits like lemons and limes, oranges, kakadu plums, strawberries, cantaloupe, kiwi. Those are some good ones. And then in terms of vitamin C rich vegetables, red and yellow bell peppers, chili peppers. If you have an autoimmune condition, though, probably not the best to incorporate peppers for being a nightshade. But then we've got dino kale or lacinato kale. Lightly steamed broccoli, Brussels sprouts, red cabbage, fresh thyme, parsley. Those are some other good ones. There are a lot of other sources, but I would say those are just some great starters, right, to get going in a bone healthy plan.
And I saw on your Facebook page or on the Bone Health Facebook page, there was a blueberry coconut smoothie recipe that there with avocado in there. And
Yep.
Exactly. So that, and then I noticed on that list you didn't have milk or dairy.
Yeah.
Where
So
people think, well, again, people think, well, where am I going to get my calcium?
yep.
And this was one of my, like growing up, I have an older brother and two younger brothers. We had a jug of milk pretty much a day. And I
That's how I
had
was
this
too.
belief, I had this belief in my head up until probably about 7 or 8 years ago, that was the reason why my bones healed so fast. And I know that's not the case now, but tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah. So for calcium, I mean, dairy products, only if they're tolerated and are part of the dietary approach, you've selected, taking into consideration your other health conditions, is that going to be something that you should be incorporating? Right. And it's not like that should be our sole source that we're incorporating all the time. Cultured dairy, so fermented dairy, yogurts, kefir, things like that, those can be beneficial. Right. But again, that is not our sole source, or should not be our sole source. And also, if you have an autoimmune condition too, or dairy is not something that you tolerate well, probably not going to be something you need to incorporate. So we need to have some other sources mixed in there too. By the way, whey protein, that can be another good option, potential option for some people that can tolerate it. A whey protein concentrate still has a little bit of that sugar in there, so it might not be the best for everybody. You get a whey protein isolate that has less of it in there. But then let's go away from dairy and let's talk about leafy greens, right? Leafy greens they're an okay source of calcium in a lot of cases, but they're not as bioavailable as dairy. Okay, cruciferous vegetables, those have good bioavailability. Seeds and almonds, when they're properly prepared, soaked, sprouted, those kinds of things, those can be good sources. And then canned bone-in fish, sockeye salmon, sardines, anchovies. That's kind of what I was talking about earlier too.
Yeah.
When it comes to getting all your calcium from food, right? This is another really controversial thing, especially for people with digestive issues. It's important to make sure your intake is adequate. And if I think the RDA for women, especially as we get, over 50, is about 1,200 milligrams a day. And a lot of times people fall short in getting that from food. That's when supplementation may be something to consider. Now, I'm not a fan of more than 500 milligrams of supplemental calcium a day, because when you're at that level, if you're getting to 800, 1,000 milligrams, like a lot of physicians recommend, when you're at that level of calcium supplementation, you're increasing your cardiovascular disease risk, calcification, and your risk for kidney stones, right? So, and then whenever you're supplementing with calcium, you've got to look at the other things too. It's not just take calcium all day and I'll be okay. There's vitamin D, there's vitamin K2, there's magnesium. There's kind of a whole group of nutrients that are going to work together, that are going to be cofactors. It's not just about calcium and vitamin D.
And that's what I'm glad you put that part in, because that was my next follow-up. If you didn't, it's like, because so many people, I just need to take calcium. My doctor says take all this calcium, and they're hearing a little bit more about vitamin D, but not this interplay between all the different nutrients that you need.
Yeah. And so I was just talking about like the absorbability of calcium from food, like over 30% of calcium in dairy, that's going to be absorbed. Edible bones, like we were talking about in fish, that hasn't really been tested, but they're probably similar. 40 to 60% of the calcium in cruciferous vegetables, that's probably going to be absorbed. So that's like your broccoli, your kale, your bok choy. 20 to 25% of calcium in legumes, if that's part of the dietary approach you're following. And again, it's not always, but that's, and then, things like rhubarb and spinach, they're going to have really poor absorbability. So when you are in the store and you're shopping and you see spinach has, a bunch of calcium in it and like really high levels, very little of that is actually bioavailable. So it's going to have poor absorbability. So it's not, you're not going to count that towards your daily intake.
And that's so important for people to understand. Just because it says it on the box or the package, or you look it up on Google that, it has this much calcium in it, that doesn't mean you're getting all of that into your body, especially, again, going back to the whole, the plant in the soil analogy with the gut and the intestines, is if that's not properly nourished and you don't have the roots there, then now it's a double whammy. Because now you think you're getting it, but you're not. And that can play with your mind too. It's like, I'm doing everything I can or you feel like you are doing everything you can nutritionally. And I want to talk about exercise in a second here. And then at the end, I want you to give basically like, what does a strong like bone health plan look like? But because I love exercise, I love fitness. I know you do too.
Yep.
That was my first love. I still love it. Tonight, I think I'm playing basketball as long as we have enough guys.
That's good.
So what types of exercise tend to be the best for bone health?
Well, so with exercise, there's two different types of stimuli that are going to be best for bone health. You've got muscle pulling on bone, and you have impact. Okay. The most effective interventions with exercise use one or both in combination. Right. So when muscle pulls on bone, it's going to make them stronger. Right. There's mechanical signaling that's sending a chemical signal that's going to, tell the bones to become stronger. Right. And then impact exercises, I would say an important consideration for these, especially it depends on who we're talking to. Like if we're talking to the group of people that's trying to be on the side of prevention, you still want to make sure you're doing things with proper form and things like that. But if you are somebody who maybe is 50, 60, 70, you've got osteopenia and osteoporosis, you probably want to proceed with just a little more caution, right? I'm not saying for everybody, you need to just be scared. And a lot of people, their doctors tell them, don't even lift a 5-pound bag, and all this, I can't, like, it's a little bit much, right? It's not that, it doesn't have to be like that. So when we're introducing something like impact exercise, we want to slowly progress. We want to do right form. We want to work with people that understand how to help somebody introduce those things. And then when we get to resistance training, for example, that's super important. We want to start with good form and lower weight, and then build up from there. The studies that show the greatest effect on improving bone are more intense, right? In the 5 to 10 rep range. And then, in terms of, the areas that are more responsive to exercise in terms of actually building bone, there aren't really a lot of muscle attachments for the femoral neck. So it's harder than it would be to build bone in an area like the spine that's a more metabolically active, right? So when somebody's getting a DEXA scan and they see their scores and they're wondering what's the level of improvement that can happen in this area versus this area, that might be a consideration too. So, and then the higher intensity stuff, but I always, just because the group that I work with, I kind of put an asterisk there, right? We don't want to just go out there and be highly intense without direction or without knowing what we're doing. That's one of the areas we do want to progress slowly and confidently.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, you want people to exercise, you want them to do things, you don't want them to be afraid of it, but then also depending on the group that you're working with or who it is, again, dealing with posture, for example, if, just like in any mechanical type machine, if things aren't lined up properly and then we add extra stress or extra load to it, it could cause it to wear down quicker. Same thing. And going back to that slump posture. Well, now if you put 150 pounds on your back trying to do a back squat, that might not be the best for you, whether you're 30 years old or 70 years old. If you're in that position, it can lead to increased breakdown. But I totally on board. We have to combine these things. It's not just doing one thing, but the cardio, the movement, the resistance training to stress it in all areas. Because, and then also, again, for the mind, you might find one that you like. That could be is it good for you? And do you like it? Those are the two things I look at as well. Like some people run because they don't know what else to do. They're like, I'm just trying to get in shape, so I'm going to run. I'm like, do you like it? It's like, no, I hate it. I'm like, okay, then there's a,
even in terms of sustainability.
Exactly. So, man, this has been amazing, but I don't know if you could go over just like a typical bone plan, to make people's bones stronger. And then obviously I'm going to avoid, especially in the Facebook group, putting links. Yeah. But because I've learned from this, for some reason, there's, the reach gets lower, especially in Facebook when they.
Oh, I totally get it.
I know you know that, but if you have questions, BYOGers, or you want to learn more, I'll put, he's going to give his information on how you can reach him, but reach out to me, message me, comment, and then we'll reach out and get you the info. But that's the reason why, if you're looking for a link, not necessarily you, Kevin, but the BYOGers, why I'm not really going to supply the links. I want to send that to you individually. So, but first, yes, I wanted to say that as we lead into, go ahead, let us know what a typical, like, stronger bone health plan looks like.
Yeah, absolutely. So if you're, a lot of times what I see when people are coming to me is they are doing a lot of things, but those things are just disparate pieces, right? They're kind of grabbing at straws. And what we need to do is you need to zoom out, and we need to not just focus on the individual tactical pieces. We need to actually create a plan, right? We need an overarching strategy, because there are a lot of things that have to be done, and we don't want to miss things, right? So the first thing that we have to do, if you kind of think about the bucket and the plant and all those things I was talking about, the first thing we have to do is identify and address the body and bone stressors contributing to bone loss and bone damage. You have to figure those things out first. So what tests are most important? How do you understand your lab tests when you get them back? Are there any root cause issues of bone loss that need to be addressed? If there are, how do you address them? All right. How do we support those conversations with our doctors when we're going to get these tests? Because a lot of times what a person will do is they'll go into their physician and they'll say, hey, I want to do these tests, or I looked up on Google, I want to do these things. And the doctor, tells them, no, we're not going to do that. These are the ones that are going to be okay. And it kind of shuts the conversation down. And then you wait another 6 months to a year before you have that conversation again. That's time lost. So we need to be able to make progress there too. That's the first part. Identify, address bone loss. Second part is you need to nourish your body, right? You need to restore the raw materials and nutrients that you need for stronger, healthier bones through diet, digestion, absorption. You need to make sure you have the right inputs to produce stronger outputs, because you can't possibly expect to rebuild something if it's not there, right? And then that also, if you have digestive issues, those could be a source of inflammation contributing to bone breakdown in the body. And the other part of this is I have a lot of people that tell me, I'm eating healthy. I would say half the people that we work with, it's not like the people we work with are coming and saying, they're not eating a lot of junk food and packaged processed food and things like that. They may be eating healthy, but if you understand that, this is going to happen on 3 levels. The first level is, are you taking in the right nutrients in the right amounts through diet, through nutrition, supplementation, things like that? The second is, are those nutrients actually being absorbed, which we just kind of talked about? And the third is, are those nutrients making it to the cell level? Are they being put to use the way you're intending them to be put to use? Okay. And a lot of times, even if someone is eating healthy, clean paleo or whatever, they might not be hitting level 1. Okay. So that's really important. And then the third part of this is you have to build strength of body, strength of mind, strength of bone in a way that's going to prevent fracture and injury, not just now, but in the future. So you need to reduce your stress, improve your sleep, improve your hormones, all those other smaller areas that play into optimizing your bone health. And we just want to make sure we're doing things the right way, right? Especially if we already know we have low bone density. This is not a guessing game. It's make objective decisions, do things that, in a way that the research says are actually going to help you. When you do that, that is what's going to give you the best shot of improvement. So, when I'm talking to people too, I'm never telling people, guaranteed bone density improvement in X period of time, osteoporosis reversal guaranteed. I hate seeing stuff like that, right? Because that's not the right thing to focus on. A lot of times people set the goal, but they never take steps that align, actions and steps that align to help them reach the goal. So what we need to do is, if the goal is improvement, so if your goal is addressing bone loss or slowing, stopping, preventing more bone loss, or actually building bone strength, or preventing fracture and injury. You need to take that goal, you need to break it down into actionable steps that you can affect the outcome of. And then you need to make progress in each of those actionable steps, because progress feeds up into improvement. That's what we need to focus on. We're focused on progress. So if you're trying to put together a plan, that's where your energy and your focus needs to be.
That's beautiful. I mean, that's exactly right. We tend to focus too much on the outcome rather than the process and count the wins along the way. It sounds familiar to the BYOG community. We talk about that a lot, is instead of focusing on that ideal, which, okay, you want to get to this point, and it seems to always keep moving or be farther away, but you can focus on the progress that you're making each day. I mean, that was absolutely amazing. How can people look you up, find you? What's the best place to reach you?
Yep. You can always find me over at bonecoach.com. That's probably the best place to get me.
And
we were on, I think we're on YouTube. I know you had mentioned, we've got our team members. We actually have on our staff. She's a dietitian, a chef. She's also a university professor, but she, based on the things that we know work in our programs and things like that, we then take those, we then take those ingredients and we create like tasty style recipe videos, and then we share them with people and put them out there on YouTube and on Facebook and things, and they get a great response. So there's those. And then we've got a podcast, got the Facebook page, Pinterest, Instagram, all those things. So at Bone Coach is usually where you can find us.
I mean, from how Kevin is speaking about those bold claims that people make and the guarantees, I mean, this is be your own guarantee, so it's a little different guarantee. But again, you can see that we vibe very well with each other. It's not like, okay, a quick fix, whether it's getting out of pain, whether it's building bone, there's reasons for the position that you're in. So now let's identify, let's address those, let's build your health back up. So then whatever symptoms or diseases or disorders that you're experiencing because of the poor health and poor function, well, now that will be restored, and it's not going to happen overnight. So again, Kevin, I can't thank you enough for being here. This has been amazing. I can't wait to for the BYOGers to let me know what they think, any comments, questions below. And man, I can't wait to talk to you again.
Hey, appreciate you having me, and we'll talk soon.